I'm Reggie Harris. I'm a licensed independent clinical social worker. I have a private practice called In Context Advising. Being a Black person in America means being connected to a legacy of resilience, a legacy of hope, a legacy of overcoming all odds.
I got bad nerves, and it's a deep dive into stress and anxiety in the Black community and where tobacco kind of fits into that story. So growing up, for me, everybody had bad nerves. My grandma used to say she had bad nerves. My mama had bad nerves. It was get my nerve healed. Where does that bad nerve conversation fit into the Black community and mental health?
Yeah, I really appreciate this conversation, this question. And I think it's important to think about it historically. So let's take a step back. And I think about the impact of the legacy of chattel slavery in our country, right? And I think about the disruption that has occurred in the ancestry of Black folks in America. And so if you think about, if you've spent any time studying West African cultures, right, there was this very much throughout, even though there were many, many cultures, lots of practices of mind-body connection to the earth, community, right, that was disrupted. And then you entered into this institution that literally traumatized, right, the existence of folks, right? And then those systems, communities were disrupted, have always been disrupted by outside forces. And so yes, any reasonably adjusted person would have bad nerves. How would you not have bad nerves? And I think it's important to define bad nerves.
Yes.
That is fear, right? That is stress of providing. That is a heightened alertness and sense of danger. And that constant being on guard for the other shoe to drop, for some outside force to come and disrupt the flow of the day. So that really is this idea of bad nerves, right? And so you turn to things that soothe you.
Right.
Drinking soothes you. You know, smoking soothes you, right? Yeah. These practices that were really coping mechanisms to bring down, those stress and those anxiety levels. And so I think it's really important to, when we talk about this idea of my nerves and bad nerves, that we can't disconnect it from the history of Black folks in this country.
Yeah, for sure. And then when we think about like addiction, right? So addiction is not something that's unique to Black folks. Everybody of every race, religion, creed goes through addiction. When you look at tobacco usage and menthol usage in the Black community, we have higher percentages of menthol use. And not necessarily of tobacco use, but it affects our physical health in such a worse way than it does anybody else. So just as a therapist, in what ways can we give tips or advice to try to mitigate addictive behaviors?
Well, the research tells us that addiction, one of the most prevalent factors around addiction is this idea of sense of support and community. And I think about addiction, and I think about how the experience of using a substance removes us from our current state and from our current experience. And so I think that the most important thing is always about addressing those factors that are impacting people's lives, right? And particularly with smoking is also different because over the last, say 3 decades, smoking has become something that people consider, and I'm using this air quotes, like a gross behavior.
Yeah.
But it's still very socially acceptable, right? And it's the same thing with drinking, right? So I think it's very different to think about having an addiction to a substance that the society allows room for, right? And I think the other thing about, particularly with smoking, is that there's a community around smoking.
Yes.
Right? Smokers all go outside and they gather and they smoke. Right? There's a ritual to smoking, right? You take the cigarette out the package. Smoking is a very sensory experience.
Yep.
The package rustles, something you hold, you flick the lighter, you feel the heat of the flame.
Yep.
You take, right? And so that creates a ritual and a tradition and a sense of community. And so one of the things is thinking about, well, how do you replace those rituals and those traditions? And then I think particularly with Black folks' use of the menthol cigarette, right? That's marketing. Yeah. Right? Like, I mean, it's like, when you said that, it's my aunt smoked Benson and Hedges menthol ultralight, right? And you look at those, those ads. And so I think that one, it's about a cultural shift and understanding how we've been impacted by marketing. And then two, thinking about replicating or replacing those sensory factors that smoking takes the place of.
It's just like you hit the nail on the head. It's marketing, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like when you see Black folks smoking those cigarettes or smoking menthols, it's the advertising, it's the corner stores, it's the coupons, it's all of that. And like, how can we try to combat these societal pressures that are placed on us?
Again, I think that's a great question, and I would say two things. I think for me, this conversation all comes down to white supremacy and how white supremacy impacts the way that Black people view themselves. And so white supremacy is not just, it is a system of engaging in which I believe that as Black folks, we struggle with the internalized messages of being less than. Right? And even the most woke, the most self-assured Black person is still actively trying to deprogram themselves of these messages that we have gotten from, our American contemporary society. So one of the things that I started to do is I remove phrases from my lexicon. Like, I don't say things like, I can't stand Black people. Have you heard that your friends have said that, right? Like you see something, you see a Black person being ridiculous, you say, I can't stand Black folks.
You're like, oh, that's us. That's our people.
But
I get so irritated. Like,
what's important about that is to not locate that foolish behavior in Blackness, but to locate that foolish behavior in larger things, right? So what we're commenting on is we're commenting the way poverty impacts behavior. Right? We're commenting on the way that lack of education impacts behavior. But that's not synonymous with Blackness. And so I think that, right, even when we see, you might be in the hood and you see a very stereotypical situation occur, right? Let's say you see a mom with the baby and the baby has maybe Kool-Aid in the bottle, right? And then we say, oh, that's just Black folks need to quit that. Right. No, that's not Blackness, that's poverty. Because you see that same scene in predominantly white spaces. And so part of how we began to shift and feel our self-value is for us to deprogram all of these messages that we've heard were about Blackness when it's not Blackness. Because in fact, Blackness is the opposite of that.
Right.
To think about, close to 500 years of oppression and discrimination, for us to be sitting in this studio right now,
right,
me and you, filmed by an all-Black crew, in this time, in arguably one of our most politically divisive years, in modern history, Black people have always not only survived but thrived. So if anything, I think that Black people need to internalize this message that we are actually
and we're
worthy and super resilient people. Like super resilient people. And so I think that it's just, but we have to actively remind ourselves of that. All the time. We're worthy. Our bodies are worthy. Black lives matter. Black mental health matters. Like our physical health matters. Absolutely.
How do you handle your anxiety when you start to feel anxious, when you start to feel, out of place as a Black man that's a part of the LGBTQIA community? How do you handle those type of pressures?
So there are a couple of things that I do. I have a real personal mind-body game. So I wake up every morning and I go to the gym every morning. One, I'm trying to be fit, right? But even more than that, it is something about waking up in the morning and just dedicating that time to myself.
Yeah.
And, you know, my boss sees, they see it, whatever.
Right.
I prioritize myself over that 9 a.m. meeting.
Right.
Right? Because I in that practice. And so what happens is that over time I didn't have to. I just got up early enough, I'd be back to the gym, I'd be ready, right? But when I look at my day and I think about, you know, in the day, how much of my time is spent giving to other things and other people. And I also think how much of my time is spent giving to predominantly white spaces and white institutions, and how much of my day is given to myself and to Black people. And I always try to balance that out, right? So that's one of the things that I do to think about that. My community, who I'm surrounded by, my tribe, that's an active cultivation. That is an active space. And I am surrounded by people who are grinding and hustling just like me, and with people who want to be uplifted and supported. So I'm always feeling in a network. So even if I'm having a low day, right, I just know, I'm like, you know what, Kailah probably up, but Kailah is probably up there because she just booked another gig. You know what, let me get it together, right? You know, even if I don't have to see it, I know that I'm surrounded by people. I feel that excellence, right? But it's a daily attention to what you need in that moment and where you're giving your energy. And so it's a practice. It is a practice of every day thinking about what is being poured into you versus what's you're giving
taken out.
Yeah.
So what does a healthy community look like for Black folks? What does health look like for Black people?
Oh, healthy community. It means strong intergenerational families, living, working, thriving together. It means the investment and revitalization of Black business centers and commercial living centers. It means seeing Black representation in all aspects, not just sports and entertainment, right? But in the arts and in the fine arts and in medicine. It takes a reframing of the use of language that describes Black people.
What is something uplifting that you would like to leave us with? And not in just this conversation, but specifically to the Black folks out there who are struggling with quitting their tobacco habit.
Yeah. I mean, so I would say, and I would think that being a Black person in America means being connected to a legacy of resilience, a legacy of hope, a legacy of overcoming all odds, and that you are here because, and it doesn't matter where you are currently in your life and in your circumstances, but you are here living and breathing right now because there were folks who died and who lived through some of the worst circumstances that you could have lived through in order to create families and allow generations of folks to live and thrive. And so if you really dig deep and connect back to that history, you realize that you have all the strength and resiliency that you need, and that you have to give yourself patience and grace and space, and you have to love yourself, right? And to know that progress is not linear, right? It looks like this. You go forward and back, but the ultimate destination is where you want to go. So you just have to keep your eye on that North Star.
Thank you so much, Reggie.
Thank you for
your
having
time
me.
here. No problem.
Yeah.
And thank you for being a part of Smoke Break.
All right.